Welcome back to Football Daily, where today we're talking about transfers. We're talking about transfers because the rumour mill is well underway. Big Jude Bellingham going to Madrid. Oh dear, Liverpool fans. And off the back of that massive news, I thought it would be appropriate to look at each Premier League club's biggest transfer rumour heading into the summer and then assign it to a category, whether or not I think that transfer would be a hit or whether or not it would be a miss. It's pretty simple. Now, I've actually only done clubs 1 to 15 because, quite frankly, from 16 downwards, Leicester, Leeds, Forest, Everton and Southampton, I don't know who's going to be in the Premier League. I really don't. It is a toss of a coin between any of those sides other than Southampton because they're relegated. However, I have included Burnley and Sheffield United as, of course, they'll be playing in the Premier League for sure next season. First up, let's start alphabetically with Arsenal. Obviously, the biggest transfer rumour surrounding the club is Declan Rice. I think this is an absolute tap-in for a hit. It would be a monstrous signing. If they can sign Declan Rice, I think it puts a flagstick down in the stand, says we are in serious business here. Here's £80 million on one of the best young Premier League central midfielders around, a leader in the team, and a player who's actually changed his game quite significantly this season. Because we can see what Declan Rice is good at. We know his defensive output and we know he is a machine off the ball, but on the ball, he's vastly improving. And I think he is going to go to a whole new level when he gets under a coach like Mikel Arteta and playing alongside players like Martin Odegaard, Gabriel Martinelli, Bukayo Saka. I think he's probably going to replace Granit Xhaka on that left-sided central midfield role, which will allow him to be a bit more expressive, getting in and around the box, which I think he can improve on. I definitely think he can improve on his goal-scoring numbers, some of his chance creation numbers, but his pass completion, pass progression, his progressive carries are all climbing. They're all going in a good direction for Arsenal. I think this is going to be one of the signings of the summer. As for Aston Villa, heavy rumours this week linking them to Emile Smith Rowe, another player I think would be a big hit at Villa Park. Now, I don't know what's gone on with him and Arteta, but it's just not happening, is it? He's not getting the minutes. I don't think he's started a single game since his return from injury, just 121 minutes in that time. It feels like Fabio Vieira's taken a step ahead of him in the pecking order, despite the fact I haven't actually been that impressed by Vieira when I've seen him play in the middle of the park. I personally feel like Emile Smith Rowe needs an awful lot more game time than he's going to be able to get at Arsenal, and Aston Villa feels like a good home, doesn't it? He's worked with Unai Emery before. Of course, Unai Emery gave him his debut back in 2018. I think that was in the Europa League. 10 goals last season, and Aston Villa tried to sign him. Let's not forget about that either. They had a £30 million bid rejected. I think if they were to go back in at about £30 million, Arsenal might well consider it. With the attacking options they've got, with Reece Nelson probably ahead of Emile Smith Rowe in the pecking order right now, with Fabio Vieira, with players like Declan Rice, maybe even another midfielder yet to arrive, Balogun's come back from loan. I think Emile Smith Rowe might have a future away from Arsenal, and Aston Villa, a club on the up, competing for European football under one of the best coaches in the league, would be a great destination. As for Bournemouth, I think we've got to talk about Hugo Larsson again. I think this one's probably going to be a miss. Like, you rejected the offer in January. There are clubs like Ajax interested. I know that Bournemouth are going to be able to pay more money, weirdly, than a club like Ajax, obviously with their new owners. Lorient potentially interested as well, of course, links to Bournemouth because of the same ownership structure. I just don't think that he's going to want to come to the Premier League to Bournemouth when European hitters are in town for him. I know the fee isn't going to be massive, sub £10 million. I personally haven't watched an awful lot of him play football. I've watched his highlight reels on YouTube, but that's not good enough. So if he didn't want to come in January, I don't see why he'd want to come in the summer. I'm going to put this in the miss column. Brentford linked this week with Florian Balogun, which would be an awesome signing. It would be an awesome signing. I would love to see Balogun at Brentford developing under Thomas Frank. Whether or not this will be a replacement for Ivan Toney, I'm not too sure about, because we've also seen Kevin Schade emerge recently. Burmo is still at the club, but there's no doubt Balogun's talent, his goal-scoring exploits in France this season have been magnificent. 0.6 expected goals per 90, non-penalty expected goals per 90 as well. I think he's the 4th highest scorer in the league. He has experienced a little bit of a fallback. He went off like a rocket, and Ream have kind of struggled recently. I think it's just 3 goals in his last 10 games. But nevertheless, 18 goals in 32 Ligue 1 appearances this season is unbelievably impressive from a 21-year-old. And he is a player that Arsenal are going to have to make a decision on. There aren't many better destinations than Brentford. In terms of progression in your career, Thomas Frank is going to get the best out of you. He's a magnificent coach. The setup there is brilliant. Do I see it happening? Probably not. I think there'll be some bigger clubs than Brentford interested in Balogun, but if they could get the deal done, it would be a hit. Next up, this one feels like it's pretty much done. I don't think it's been confirmed yet, though, which is the reason I've put it in the rumours section, which is João Pedro to Brighton for £30 million. We've seen Fabrizio, we've seen The Athletic talking about this effectively as if it's a done deal. The medical seems to have happened, but De Zerbi didn't confirm it. He refused to confirm it in this week's press conference, so let's continue to talk about it as a rumour, seeing as it hasn't been made official. I think this is a magnificent signing. Brighton's record transfer, but he's had a great season this year in the Championship. Huge pedigree when he arrived at Watford in the first place, and he's kind of being miscategorised slightly by some pundits as this out-and-out number 9 who's going to score loads of goals for Brighton. He can operate in a lot of different areas. You know, it wouldn't surprise me to see him operate a little bit deeper in and around the edge of the box, off a striker. I think this is a fantastic signing. Their recruitment is always good under Tony Bloom, and you know if Tony Bloom is willing to stump up £30 million, break the club record for a player, he's going to be good. João Pedro next season is going to be shit hot for Brighton. Let's go to Chelsea then up next, and links this week with Sadio Mane, and I'm afraid I'm going to put this one in the miss column. I just do not get it. He's 31 now. He's under contract until 2025 at Bayern Munich, and obviously it's not really worked there. And reports in Germany suggest that Bayern Munich are willing to sell Sadio Mane so they can bring in an out-and-out number 9, use some of the fee from Mane to do that, because they've got enough wide players. They've got enough players that can play off a striker, the likes of Sadio Mane, the likes of Serge Gnabry. You know, Jamal Musiala can play off both flanks and as a number 10. They don't necessarily need Sadio Mane as much as they need a number 9. He hasn't had, I think, the explosive season a lot of Bayern fans were expecting. Just 7 goals in the Bundesliga this season. He's obviously been out for a considerable amount of time with that broken leg as well that caused him to miss the World Cup. But why do Chelsea want Mane? They need a 9. Just sign a number 9. They've got Nkunku arriving. They've got 2,000 wingers on the books at the moment, half of which they need to sell. They need to sell Pulisic, they need to sell Ziyech, they probably need to sell Callum Hudson-Odoi. Mudrik's playing out on the left, Nkunku can play out on the left, they've got Sterling can play out on the left. Why on earth would they need Mane? Let's get real. This would be a ridiculous move. This is an absolute miss. Next up, Crystal Palace. Heavy rumours this week linking them with Lookman, who's of course playing for Atalanta right now, 5th in Serie A, having a stunning season. 13 goals, 4 assists. He's their top goal scorer, second top assister, massive impact in huge games. But I think this would be a miss. I don't see why Atalanta would sell to Crystal Palace. Like, he would be a good player. He would be a good player for Crystal Palace, potentially a Wilfried Zaha replacement. But the amount you would have to pay Atalanta to convince them to sell their top goal scorer, one of their best creative wingers, when they're pushing for Champions League places, would be astronomical. He's under contract to 2026. You may be talking 50-60 million pounds to get him out of Atalanta. Palace aren't going to pay 50 million pounds for a winger to replace Wilfried Zaha. They're going to have to shop smarter. And we've seen them at times when Wilf Zaha's been out injured, get great output out of the likes of Eze and Elise without Wilf Zaha. Maybe they'll be thinking long term, could we just drift Eze slightly wider, sign a number 10, sign a player that's going to suit the next manager, which is another problem. They're being linked with Lookman without a future gaffer in place. Hodgson's not going to be here next season, so who is making the decision to sign Lookman when the next manager might come in and go, I don't want Lookman? I don't know. This one for me is a miss. I think he is having a really good season, but 1 goal since January. He went off like a rocket. I think it would be a big old overpayment potentially. I'm not sure. Fulham this week by Marker, I think, linked to Mauro Icardi for €12 million. Has a player ever felt more of a miss? No. 30 years old. He's obviously on loan at Galatasaray this season, scoring goals as he does everywhere. I think it's 14 and 16 in the Super League. On loan from PSG. PSG is still paying 90% of his wages, which are going to be astronomical. He comes with so much baggage, Wandanara included. They've already got a number 9 Fulham that scores goals in Mitrovic. And they've got a backup number 9. I just don't think Icardi would be a good move. I think his off-the-field problems outweigh the fact that he scores goals. He's 30 now. There's not a lot of upside. He's going to be on massive wages. Fulham fans, it's going to take an awful lot of convincing to convince me of this deal. Moving to Liverpool now, who of course missed out on Jude Bellingham this week, which personally, I'm going to whisper it, I don't think it's the worst thing. I don't think Liverpool could afford to rebuild the entire midfield, maybe add another defender, and spend £150 million on one player as part of that. I don't think it was possible. So you know what? Let him go to Real Madrid. Big positive for them is that he hasn't ended up at Manchester City, and then focus being able to sign 2 or 3 midfielders that can produce output of Jude Bellingham's level, and one of them being linked this week is Alexis Mac Allister, who I think would be a real hit. His attacking endeavours are extremely impressive in the Premier League this season. When you look at some of his numbers, he's in the top 10% of most attacking categories for midfielders in Europe, which is ideal for Liverpool, because not only do I think they need a defensive midfielder, I think they need somebody who can contribute in the final third a little bit more from their midfield. And that's probably what Alexis Mac Allister can add. But whilst he's in the top 7%, for instance, for non-penalty expected goals and assists, his defensive output is low. So to cover for that, they're likely going to have to sign a bit of a beast in midfield too. So if they can get the deal done for about £50 million, and we've seen Fabrizio reporting things like this, there's the magic of editing, on screen right now, saying that deals is progressing and it could be done as early as May, June. That would allow them to potentially spend money on another area. So I think Mac Allister is a smart pickup. I think he would be very effective for Liverpool, and Jurgen Klopp would be able to coach some of the areas maybe he's struggling in defensively into him. Next up, we've got Mateo Kovacic, Manchester City's big rumour, of course, so far this summer, although they were linked to Lionel Messi this week. It's not happening. He's going to Saudi Arabia. Mateo Kovacic is an interesting one. I'm really torn because he's 28 years old now, and his injury problems just frighten me. 18 separate injuries, of course, since joining Chelsea. He hasn't played, or started, I should say. He hasn't started more games in a season than 23 since he was Inter Milan. Like, he's had so many injury problems. He's been so inconsistent with his fitness over the years. But there is definitely a player in there. And it feels like he's a very Manchester City type player. His ball retention is excellent. His ball progression numbers are superb. He is an asset in multiple positions. He can play slightly deeper. He can play slightly more attacking. With İlkay Gundogan set to leave this summer, he would be an ideal replacement for that role. But the injuries, the fee I feel like Chelsea are going to demand, despite the fact his contract is up in 2024, is quite hefty. I don't know. I feel like there's better options on the market than Mateo Kovacic in that midfield role when you're Manchester City. Potentially winning a treble, feels like you can attract anybody you want. I'm putting this in miss. I think Man City can do better. I don't think Manchester United can do an awful lot better than Harry Kane, though. This would be a definite hit for me. I know that he's 29, he's had injury problems in the past, but he feels like he's put them behind him. Look at his numbers and minutes over the last couple of seasons. We're talking 34, 35 starts over the last couple of seasons since he's got that new physio on his ankle. Massive goal-scoring numbers, massive creative numbers. And just because he is 30 doesn't mean it's a write-off. We're seeing players like Lewandowski, Karim Benzema, playing right into their late 30s now. Fitness levels amongst top professionals are changing. I don't see any reason why Harry Kane can't play till he's 35, 36, still scoring goals, playing a little bit deeper, creating chances. I think he'd be amazing for a lot of the forward line. He'd give a real distinct position to it. He'd be able to drop in players like Bruno and Rashford and Antony would be able to play off him, bop little balls off him. I think he's the perfect number 9 for Erik Ten Hag's system. Do I think United are going to be able to get him? Yeah, I do. But I think they're going to get rinsed by Daniel Levy. Next up, we've got Newcastle, where we've seen reports this week like this from Gerard Romero, linking him to Barcelona's Rafinha to the tune of €80 million. 80 million euros. Like, he's been all right this season. 21 starts, 7 goals, 6 assists. And his creative numbers are still superb. Top 10% for progressive carries, take-ons. His dribble numbers are still off the charts. But 80 million euros? Not for me. That's a miss. That's an overpayment. I think that Barcelona would be snapping hands off at 80 million euros, given the wide attacking options they've got at the club and the need for money. I don't see any way Newcastle pay 80 million for Rafinha. Not in this market. For Spurs, we've got James Maddison, whose contract is up in 2024. I think And I actually personally think Leicester are going to go down this season. He's had a good season, but he has had injury problems. It would be a hit. Yeah, he would be an absolute monster for Tottenham Hotspur. They need a creative midfielder. You look at their midfield options, the likes of Basuma, Højbjerg, even Bentancur is now out till November. They need somebody who can create and can connect midfield to attack. That is what James Maddison can do. He could also offer cover for Kulusevski. They're missing a profile at Maddison in the squad. I think he would be ideal for them. Next up, we've got West Ham, who are being linked with Charles de Ketelaere from AC Milan, who's only been there one season. And obviously they're thinking about a potential Declan Rice replacement here. His defensive numbers, we know, are very strong. They've been consistent throughout his entire career. He's a really good passer, doesn't contribute a lot in the attacking areas, but neither does Declan Rice. So these numbers, I think they're pretty impressive. I personally think he'd be a really good option if Declan Rice was to leave this summer. But the report also suggests this deal would only happen if AC Milan were allowed to get Gianluca Scamacca in part exchange, which for me would make it a miss. I do not think West Ham should be offloading Gianluca Scamacca. I think it would be a mistake similar to how they let Seb Aller go. I think just because Scamacca doesn't fit with David Moyes' style of play doesn't mean he's not a long-term option for West Ham. There's definitely a good striker in there. And I think the next manager that comes in, because I think they might look at changing David Moyes in the summer, will really fancy Scamacca. He's not been given anywhere near enough of a chance this season. And that bears out in the numbers. Scamacca hasn't played a full 90 minutes this calendar year. That's so unacceptable. I know he's had injury problems, but he's got to be given a chance. When he's had chances in the Europa Conference League, admittedly, it's the Conference League, he's scored goals. For me, Scamacca should be kept. I know that CDK would be a wicked signing for them, but not at the cost of Scamacca for me. Wolves being linked with Ugarte this week, which would obviously be a crazy hit, a huge coup. Probably a Ruben Neves replacement, even though he doesn't profile that similarly. Much more of a destroyer in the mould of Joao Palhinha. His tackle interception numbers, we're talking the best in Europe, effectively. Flat out, he is an absolute beast. But surely Wolves can't get him. Like, he's being linked with Liverpool, he's being linked with Chelsea, he's being linked with some of the top European clubs to the tune of 60, 70 mil. Wolves ain't going to be able to get him. Like, it's just not going to happen. I'm just going to say, imagine they did, though. Jorge Mendes pulls some strings and he ends up, at Molineux 30 mil. Not happening. But if it did, it would be a huge hit. He's crazy. I really like Ugarte. As for the two promoted sides, then Ian Maatsen being linked with a return on loan. I think that seems quite likely, and I think that would be a huge hit. He's an amazing season there, of course, at Burnley, as probably one of the greatest championship sides we've ever seen. 4 goals, 6 assists in 37 starts. Knows Vincent Kompany's system inside out. Not going to get in the Chelsea side over Cucurella or Ben Chilwell. No point rotting there as third choice. Go back out on loan. And then finally, Sheffield United being linked with Gyökeres, which would be a huge win for them. I think they're going to need more goals next season. Hopefully they're able to keep hold of Ndiaye, but I've seen links with AC Milan this week. 14 goals, 9 assists he's put up this season. You also see a fair few goals from Ollie McBurney in the Championship. I think he's put up 12 goals. He wasn't able to cut it in the Premier League last time he was here. Maybe that'll change this time, maybe. But I think it was 1 goal in 23 appearances in his last season in the Premier League. So I expect them to try and sign more goals. Gyökeres, who's had an unbelievable season in the Championship, 21 goals, 10 assists, would be a great option for them. Can they afford it? I'm not too sure. I think Sheffield United's budget is going to be small. And there's going to be a lot of interest in a player like Gyökeres from across Premier League sides in that lower band. Anywhere from 20th to 13th will be interested in a player like him. So they'll be competing with some good sides. Nevertheless, if they were to get him, it would be a hit. Okay, so there we go. My hit or miss for some of the Premier League clubs' biggest transfer rumours. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. We'll see you later.